Hello, family. Welcome to the African Esquire show on Recharge Colonialism TV. I'm your host, Tierney Cherie, and we're about to get into this week's African news. I keep forgetting to do this, so just a reminder, if you do want to get updates on these shows or any shows that I post, and if you want to get updates on any articles or anything that I'm involved in that I post, I would ask you to join my Telegram group. Telegram is a decentralized platform that I use regularly to update people. The link is right down below inside of a pinned comment. So let's get into this first story. If you have not heard, the Supreme Court has declared, and this is the United States Supreme Court, that U.S. citizens in Puerto Rico are inferior, at least according to their recent opinion. Colonialism, an issue that really occupies the minds of most Americans, has once again reared its ugly head with an April 21st U.S. Supreme Court decision. In the U.S. versus Valilo Madero, the court, following the nativist and xenophobic decisions of more than a century ago, upheld the federal government's exclusion of Puerto Rico from a Social Security benefit program, which will stop more than $2 billion a year from flowing to U.S. citizens living on the island. Now, let me just give everyone who doesn't know some information. Puerto Rico is one of the currently colonized states inside of the United States, or territories in the United States. They do not receive full recognition of a state. People who live in Puerto Rico do not have the same access to the benefits that a lot of American citizens do who live on the mainland. This is one more instance where they do not have access to benefits. Yet the United States gets to say that they basically control this area. They do not want to allow this area to be sovereign, yet they do not want to allow the people who live there, the people who mostly are of indigenous and African roots, they do not want to let these people have any rights like they deserve and whenever you're actually a citizen of a place. Now, the justices found that the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause doesn't require equal treatment for U.S. citizens living in the territory, a perverse conclusion because the text of the Equal Protections Clause specifically prohibits the government from treating U.S. citizens in an unequal fashion. The government shall not deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the law. That's what it says. Yet the court upheld the exclusion of U.S. citizens in Puerto Rico from the Supplemental Security Income Program, covering needy people who are blind, otherwise disabled, or elderly. This SSI program is a safety net program that provides cash assistance to older, disabled, or blind Americans who have very low incomes. The Congress has excluded residents of Puerto Rico and 3 other U.S. colonies from the program. Yes, U.S. has other colonies. Virgin Islands is another colony of the United States. That one's almost completely people of African descent. You also have Philippines, you have Guam. So these are modern day colonies, people. This is not even neo-colonialism. This is formal colonialism. And the United States government has basically been quiet on the fact that they're continuing their colonial legacy, although they pretend to feel apologetic for past actions that they have done. They continue explicit colonialism, neo-colonialism more than any other country. And this is a very good example of the fact that this modern day colonialism that they're practicing is outward and bold. They don't care about what you say. The case is actually very interesting. My understanding is it was a man of Puerto Rican descent who moved to mainland United States. And if you're in mainland United States, you can get these benefits. And essentially, he had decided to move back home to Puerto Rico. When he gets home, essentially the government finds out that, hey, this guy has been receiving SSI. And again, SSI is for needy people, for people who are often elderly or injured. This guy's receiving SSI and he's not in mainland. So we recognize Puerto Rico as a part of the United States, but not mainland United States. So essentially, they decided that they were going to stop giving him benefits and tell him he had to pay back $28,000. I believe that was the amount, or 20 something $1,000. You can check out the story yourself, and actually pay back benefits to the United States government. Such robbery. Meanwhile, guess who's getting $33 billion more dollars that they're trying to throw at them at this current moment, Ukraine. So that's just a hypocrisy. People who you are actually pretending to go to lord over, you won't even give them the basic benefits that you'll give to people who are completely separate and far away. So this is just an important story to keep in mind. Obviously, a horrific instance of how the colonial powers will continue by any means to show just how little care they have for our people. And it's really up to us to assert sovereignty, assert independence and separation. That's, to me, is what I think the conversation should be. I'm going to continue this conversation on Saturday on the WCC podcast and book club, particularly talking about the sovereignty aspect, the fact that African people, a lot of times we vote against sovereignty because we think staying connected will be some benefit, but over and over again, they show us that even the little bit of benefits that they try to pretend that they're giving us by staying connected to them is all done inside of a halfway, a second-class citizenship way, where they're really kind of dehumanizing you. And it puts you in a position where, are you going to accept this? Are you going to not accept it? And so I think that's what we're going to talk about on Saturday. This story is actually brought to me by a loved one. So the FDA has proposed banning menthol cigarettes from in the United States. So the FDA is a federal agency in the United States. They basically make the rules as far as food and drugs, as far as any type of products that are on the shelves. And they are proposing banning menthol cigarettes. And you might say, well, what does that have to do with African people? Well, number one, something I was not aware of is that the majority of our people who are smokers smoke these types of cigarettes. And there's a long history of cigarette companies purposefully targeting us with these types of cigarettes. The other thing is that they say that they're more dangerous type of cigarettes because I've never smoked, so I don't know this, but apparently they're smoother. That's what they say. And so people might ingest more of them than other cigarette brands. So I'm going to read from the story. It says, the FDA is proposing a ban on menthol cigarettes. This move by the FDA was encouraged by the NAACP, which sent out a statement earlier in the week noting that the tobacco industry's egregious marketing practices, including giving out free cigarettes. This pattern of activity continues today, with expanded market strategies like supporting and providing sponsorship funding for events. Now, this is where I really want to emphasize. So they've been providing sponsorship funding for events targeted at us or events for us, supporting various Black leaders with financial support, discounting menthol products in Black neighborhoods, abundant advertising in stores frequented by Black communities, which the NAACP noted. According to the FDA, menthol enhances nicotine addictiveness, so it's more addictive than other cigarettes. And the flavor makes the cigarettes easier to use. The industry, according to Wallow, knows them to be a great starter product, a way to get people hooked. And the push goes beyond just imagery. So this is more appalling. Tobacco industry specifically found influencers in the Black community. It could be a barber, a bellhop, and they give them free samples. They go to our communities, and this is just why we have to be on top of things and why we have to be more aggressive than our oppressors. Because even if we're not willing to canvass our communities, if we're not willing to go door to door and say, hey, we're trying to have this meeting, blah blah, we're going to be right here. Here's a flyer. Guess who's going door to door inside of our communities trying to get people to do certain things? These cigarette companies. So yeah, it says they would go to a barbershop, bellhop. They give them free samples to build markets. The companies also sponsor events like the Cool Jazz Fest and Dizzy Gillespie next to a pack of Cools. So according to a 2018 national survey on drug use and health, 85% of Black smokers preferred menthol cigarettes. A lot of Black periodicals like Ebony Magazine became dependent on advertising that they were so silent. This is a smaller point also, like when you have different magazines like Ebony Magazine being dependent on this type of money from advertisers, and then whenever these magazines that are dependent on a capitalist system that exploits us and does things to harm us, and they go under, everyone wants to cry about it. Everyone wants to cry whenever a Black magazine goes under or is sold to a white person, or a Black network, TV network that has pushed poison inside of our community does something similar. And we have to stop, playing both sides. Are we for people who are for us, or are we against it? Are we going to allow people to exploit us or sell us out, just so that they can meet their bottom dollar or bottom line. And at the end of the day, we're left inside of the same position, whether they succeed or they don't succeed. I understand the need or the craving for Black owned and things like that, but Black owned and white sold out is not something that we should try to even maintain or pretend is for the good of our communities. So that's just another aspect. But I definitely want your thoughts on this whole thing happening as far as, are people being targeted with something that we know, obviously, whether it's alcohol, whether it's cigarettes, whether it's the drugs, pharmaceutical drugs that are more targeted towards us, whether it's food. We're always targeted with the lowest quality, whether it's fast food, always quality type of products, which is an intentional effort, in my opinion, to inflict genocide on African people. So over on the continent, it's being reported that Africa's first vaccine plant risks closure after no orders. Africa's first COVID-19 vaccination plant risks shutting down after receiving not a single order, a company executive said on Saturday. The pharmaceutical company Aspen Pharmacare got a licensing deal in November last year to package and sell Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine and distribute them across Africa. According to the World Health Organization, as of March this year, only a sixth of adults in Africa have been fully vaccinated. So that's an interesting story. I think at this particular point in the African continent, vaccination, it's kind of like the pandemic has passed over Africa and has not affected it with save, certain parts of Africa, such as South Africa and northern parts of Africa, has really passed over and really most people supposedly have been exposed and possibly infected and not had the same effects that other people have had. And so most people have been moved on from COVID, I think, in the African continent. So this need for this Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine is probably not going to be as pressing as it might be inside of other parts of the world. So just an interesting story I wanted to bring to you all. The last two stories are about the Central African Republic. So one is very interesting. Central African Republic has adopted Bitcoin as an official currency. I told you all that more and more the cryptocurrencies are becoming more accepted inside of Africa and really inside of the world. Like, it seems like there's going to be a time very soon where there will be a currency, a world currency that will be digital. Now, the CAR has adopted Bitcoin. Most of the former French colony's 5 million citizens, however, who enjoy just $525 of GDP per capita, lack access to broadband or 4G phone reception, a prerequisite for Bitcoin-based transactions. Unlike El Salvador, which was a third of which is another country that already adopted Bitcoin, a third of its people working in the United States who work in El Salvador, so that you have those people going back and forth. There are very few overseas people who are Central African migrants wanting to send money home. Bangu, if that I pronounced that right, its riverside capital, has already has access to digital currency via mobile money networks run by operators like France's Orange. And unlike many deeply impoverished countries, they have a stable currency to the six-country CFA franc, which is pegged to the euro and underpinned by the Bank of France and overseen by the regional bank of the of Central African states and neighboring countries, Cameroon. Swapping that for wild gyrations of Bitcoin sits uneasily with many people inside of this Bitcoin or crypto era. So I don't really know a lot about, the particularities of cryptocurrency. I've said that before. You're welcome to discuss openly here. I've said that I'm always suspenseful or not trusting of anything that's not coming from us, frankly. Anything that's coming from the globalist system as a solution to our problems, I'm always suspectful of that. The fact that you have people like Jack Dorsey, who was the former Twitter CEO, pushing for Bitcoin in Africa, makes me even more suspectful. So I'm not necessarily gung-ho. I do think this is where things are going. So I don't know. Do you think this is a good decision. Ultimately, it's still a foreign it's still a currency that's not controlled by the CAR. And so the CAR having a CFA franc and now having Bitcoin, I don't think it's anything super revolutionary. And as the article pointed out, a lot of African people do not use Bitcoin at this particular point. So looking for okay, so this is a lot more serious. Russian troops have reportedly been killing civilians in the Central African Republic. That's what the Human Rights Watch says. Now, what did I say about Human Rights Watch on this channel? Anytime Human Rights Watch says something, watch out for them, literally. So we're going to start off with this. It says Human Rights Watch on Tuesday said there was compelling evidence that Russian paramilitary troops were committing serious rights abuses and killing civilians in the Central African Republic. The private military contractors are often described as belonging to the Wagner Group, the same group that has been accused of killing civilians in Mali, a Russian entity with no known legal status. Forces in the CAR, whom witnesses identified as Russian, appear to have similarly executed, tortured, and beaten citizens since 2019. That's what Human Rights Watch said. Several Western governments and the United Nations, experts, and special rapporteurs have found evidence that the forces linked to Russia operating in the CAR include a significant number of members of the Wagner Group, a Russian private military security contractor with apparent links to the Russian government, it added. The UN, the NGO, and the CAR former colonial ruler France accused both army and rebels of committing crimes against civilians. Human Rights Watch said that Russian-speaking men shot dead 12 unarmed men arrested at a checkpoint near Basangoa, northwest of the capital of Bangui, on July 21st last year. New York-based group who also spoke of arbitrary detentions, tortures, and summary killings of men randomly arrested in the streets in the Central African town of Alindayo, June of last year, is making this report. So, and what do you think? I mean, really, at this particular point, one, let's just conceptualize and keep in mind that Human Rights Watch is notorious for spreading misinformation about the African continent. So that has to be stated first. Number two, the fact that the Human Rights Watch, even them aside, that the CAR is another country in Africa that basically, I don't even think it was them who necessarily cut off relations with France. France cut off relations with CAR because the CAR had a close relationship with Russia. So kind of like a jealous boyfriend, France cut off relations. And France, of course, is the former colony of this region of this particular country too. So they cut off military assistance to the CAR, and the CAR continued their relationship with Russia and has asked for more troops to come over. Obviously, like I keep warning, I do believe that something with this Wagner group in Russia, there's really a intentional effort to cause some type of proxy war with Russia inside of these African countries that have gotten military assistance from Russia. I believe that very much because the overwhelming reporting coming from, just coming all at once at a time where Russia is already obviously the pariah of the world right now, or the Western world, as far as their dealings with Ukraine. And because Africa did not take similar positions as the Western world, Africa has been demonized by many parts of the human rights community. And so the timing, the timing is always interesting. The setup is always interesting. France is no friend to African people. So the idea that France was this liberator trying to help the CAR people with military assistance to deal with insurgency, and France has left, and now all of a sudden they're seeing these mass atrocities and they're trying to stop them. I just don't buy that. At the same time, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I can speculate. And I think that's something we all have to be comfortable saying. Like, we can speculate that this could be a complete fabrication, but it could be true. It could be true. And that's something that we don't want to take lightly. So I just, don't, at this point, I'm still waiting and watching. I know the political intentions and messaging of this is that more and more this Russian Wagner group, which I think is also being accused of a lot of things in Ukraine, is going to be used for a license to start other wars inside of other countries. I believe that, or at least try to amp up the presence of Western neocolonial forces also inside of other countries. So what are your thoughts on this report? What are your thoughts on all the reports? I'd love to hear them. That's really all that we have for this week. Please do go to wechargecolonialism.org. I just wrote an article I would love all of you to read. The article is about this genocide that I think is happening. I believe that everything is pointing to a genocide is happening against our people to intentionally see us starve out. So you can see that article on wechargecolonialism.org. You can also donate if you appreciate what we do, the stuff that we put out. You can donate to us and continue to support. And thank you so much. We will see you all in the next video.
I think what we are suffering from is ideological confusion. That is, that we're not clear, we're not thinking clearly, and that we need a context within which to answer the question, is something good or bad? We assume that we have the same goals, but we never say what they are. It's time for us to think and articulate and establish our goals as Black nationalists and Pan-Africanists. We need vision, we need clarity. Otherwise, we can't answer the question, is it good for African people? Nationalist goal is self-determination. In the spirit of Delaney, Garvey, Malcolm, Amos, it is Pan-African commitment, that is the unity of African people worldwide and one Africa on the continent as a basis for African strength. So we are about building a Pan-African world order based on the principles of Ma'at, not in imitation of a European order. Ma'at as justice and truth. We need a nation concept, as Dr. Clark told us. A Black economic program, a cultural program, an independent political organization, independent Black media, independent African-centered education financed by us and controlled by us. All of this presupposes, very importantly, an African Black identity.